As dusk settled over the remote expanse of pine and birch, the group of friends reached the edge of what was supposed to be a lively campground. Their laughter, which had echoed through the winding forest road, faded as they emerged into the clearing. What greeted them was not the promised bustle of fellow campers, but an unsettling silence, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of a lone bird. The campground sprawled before them, marked by clusters of tents scattered across the grassy plain. Each tent was zipped shut, their colors faded and their shapes sagging slightly in the evening breeze. Around them, folding chairs sat in uneven circles. Coolers rested beside picnic blankets half unfurled, and lanterns hung from branches, unmoving. It was as if the campers had simply stepped away for a moment. Yet there was no sign of life, no smell of campfire smoke, no laughter, no footsteps. The world felt paused, as if holding its breath. The friends, Emma, Lucas, Priya, Marcus, and Sarah, unloaded their gear slowly, exchanging wary glances. The ground crunched beneath their boots, and the air felt heavy, thick with the weight of something unspoken. Emma knelt beside one of the tents, brushing her fingers over a forgotten sweatshirt. She peered inside, finding sleeping bags, backpacks, and even a half-read novel resting open, its pages fluttering in the wind. "Maybe they went hiking," Lucas suggested, his voice low, trying to fill the empty space. But as they moved from tent to tent, they saw the same story repeated. Mugs half filled with cold coffee, phones plugged into portable chargers, and even a board game mid-play, pieces scattered as if the players had risen abruptly. There was no sign of struggle, no footprints leading away into the woods, and no indication of where everyone had gone. They gathered in the middle of the campground, feeling small beneath the towering trees. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of amber and violet. Priya pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders, shivering despite the mild evening air. "Should we leave?" she whispered, her words barely audible. Marcus shook his head. "We came all this way. Maybe they'll be back soon. Let's just set up our tents. If someone returns, we'll ask what happened." Reluctantly, the others agreed. They chose a spot on the edge of the clearing, away from the abandoned tents, and set up their own camp. The silence pressed in from all sides, amplifying every snap of a twig, every sigh of the wind, every beat of their hearts. As darkness deepened, they gathered around a small fire, its flames dancing and casting long shadows across the empty campground. Sarah tried to lighten the mood with stories of past camping trips, describing mishaps with raccoons and late-night games of flashlight tag, but her voice seemed swallowed by the silence. Emma kept glancing over her shoulder, her gaze drawn to the empty tents. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something was waiting, just beyond their sight. The night grew colder, and the fire dwindled to glowing embers. One by one, the friends retreated to their tents, zipping themselves inside, seeking comfort in the thin walls of nylon. The silence outside was total, but within their tents, their minds raced with unease. It was in the deepest part of the night, when the world seemed most still, that the whispers began. At first, Sarah thought she was dreaming. She heard her name, soft and distant, floating through the air like mist. She sat up, her heart pounding, and pressed her ear to the tent wall. The whisper came again, this time clearer. Her name, spoken in a voice she didn't recognize. "Sarah?" She froze, listening, her breath caught in her throat. The voice was coming from the direction of the abandoned tents. She unzipped her tent as quietly as she could and peered out. Across the clearing, the empty tents stood silent, their forms barely visible in the moonlight. Then she heard another name, Lucas, carried on the wind, soft as a sigh. Lucas, lying awake in his own tent, heard it too. He turned on his flashlight, aiming it at the empty tents, but the beam revealed nothing. He tried to convince himself it was just the wind, twisting through the fabric, playing tricks on his mind. But the voices persisted, calling each of their names one after another, always from the direction of the abandoned tents. Priya clung to her sleeping bag, her pulse racing. The whispers seemed to slip beneath the tent walls, curling around her like cold fingers. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing them to stop, but they grew louder, more insistent. Priya. Emma. Marcus. The friends emerged from their tents, drawn together by fear. Their faces were pale in the moonlight, eyes wide and searching. They stood in a tight circle, shivering despite the layers of clothing, listening as the whispers grew louder, more urgent. "Did you hear that?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. Lucas nodded. "They're calling our names from the empty tents." Marcus tried to sound brave. "It's probably someone messing with us. Maybe the campers came back and are trying to scare us." But his words rang hollow. The campground was still deserted, and the whispers were not playful. They were mournful, heavy with longing. The friends moved closer to the abandoned tents, their flashlights illuminating the faded colors and drooping shapes. The air seemed colder here, and the whispers grew louder, swirling around them, echoing from tent to tent. Emma knelt beside the closest tent, her hand shaking as she reached for the zipper. She hesitated, glancing at the others, then slowly unzipped the entrance. The inside was exactly as before, belongings scattered, sleeping bags rumpled, but no sign of anyone. The whisper came again, louder, right in her ear. "Emma!" She scrambled away, her heart hammering. "There's nobody inside!" she gasped. Lucas stepped forward, shining his flashlight into another tent. "Hello?" he called, his voice cracking. "Is anyone there?" Silence. Suddenly, the whispers stopped, replaced by a deep, unnatural quiet. The friends stood frozen, listening, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Then, all at once, every zipper on every abandoned tent slid open, slowly and deliberately, as if an invisible hand were unsealing them. The friends stumbled backward, fear rooting them in place. From within the tents, cold air poured out, swirling around their ankles, and the whispers returned, louder than before. But now, the voices were different. They spoke in fragments, pleading, warning, begging for help. "Don't go. Stay with us.
Help me."
The friends backed away, clutching one another, their flashlights flickering as the batteries drained. The darkness seemed to press in, thick and suffocating. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "We should leave, now." But as they turned to run, the whispers grew frantic, echoing through the trees, calling their names over and over, overlapping, desperate.
Sarah, Lucas, Emma, Marcus, Priya.
The friends sprinted toward their own camp, stumbling over roots and rocks, panic driving them forward. They grabbed their bags, abandoning most of their gear, and fled into the forest, guided only by the fading beams of their flashlights. As they ran, the whispers followed, weaving through the trees, growing fainter but never fully disappearing. The forest seemed endless, every path twisting back on itself, every shadow a threat. Finally, they burst onto the main road, breathless and shaking. The whispers fell away, replaced by the distant hum of civilization. They piled into their car, slamming the doors shut, and sped away, leaving the silent campground behind. In the days that followed, the friends tried to make sense of what had happened. They searched online for news of the campground, for stories of missing campers, for any explanation. But there was nothing. No reports, no warnings, no mention of the strange disappearance. Each of them struggled to sleep, haunted by the memory of the whispers, the way their names had been called from the darkness. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before dawn, they thought they heard the voices again, distant and mournful. Emma dreamed of the abandoned tents, of zippers sliding open in the dead of night, of cold air swirling around her feet. Lucas heard his name whispered in the wind every time he walked through a quiet room. Sarah kept her windows shut tight, afraid that the whispers might slip inside. Priya, unable to shake the fear, returned to the campground in her mind, retracing every step, searching for clues. Marcus tried to rationalize it, telling himself it was all a trick of the mind, a shared hallucination brought on by fear and exhaustion. But deep down, each of them knew the truth. Something had happened in that campground, something beyond explanation, something that lingered in the empty tents and the silent night. As months passed, The story faded from their conversations, replaced by the routines of daily life. But the memory remained, a shadow on the edge of their thoughts, a question without an answer. Sometimes, late at night, Emma would receive a text from Sarah or Lucas or Priya, a simple message. "Did you hear that?" And she would know without asking that the whispers had returned. They never spoke of it to anyone else. As the years went by, the group drifted apart, each carrying the weight of that night alone. But the campground remained, untouched and silent. New campers arrived, drawn by the promise of solitude and adventure, setting up their tents among the faded remnants of those who had come before. As the sun set and the shadows lengthened, the whispers began anew, soft and persistent, calling out the names of those who had arrived, weaving through the empty tents, searching for someone who would listen. And so the silent campground waited, its story unfolding again and again, a mystery hidden in the darkness, a warning carried on the wind. If you ever find yourself in a quiet forest, standing among abandoned tents and forgotten belongings, listen carefully. You might hear your name, whispered from the shadows, calling you to join the others who disappeared, leaving only silence, and the echo of your own footsteps behind. The silent campsite remains, its secrets untouched, its whispers waiting for the next traveler to answer the call.